To begin with, let me introduce myself. I'm Girish Shahane. I'm Director Art of the SKODA Prize, which in the 3 years of its existence has become the most prestigious and certainly is the largest art prize in India. It is given to an artist under 45 who, in the opinion of our jurors, has produced the most innovative and exciting solo show of the past 12 years. To my left is Reena, Saini, Kallat, and to my right is Mansi, Bhatt. So to start with you, Reena, when we speak about artists, the popular impression still is of somebody, usually a man, who wakes up in the morning and he has a small studio where there's an easel and a canvas and he paints through the day, and then in the evening maybe he goes and sits in the Irani and discusses art and politics with friends. But that's not the life of the artist these days, is it?
Well, certainly, Girish. I mean, much of our time gets divided between, say, spending time in the studio, which is something that has now become a sort of very disciplined practice in my case over the last 6-7 years, where every morning I'm in my studio at 8:30 a.m. and I'm there till about 6 in the evening. Well, what takes place has changed over the years. I mean, it is a kind of a laboratory where one is kind of struggling with ideas, with several processes. There could be multiple works that one is working on at a certain time.
You particularly work a lot with things like stamps, for example. Just tell me a little about how you came to work with these rubber stamps, what they signify in your work, and what are the meanings of the sorts of works you've done with those stamps.
Yes, I mean, amongst one of the sort of mediums that have now over the years been used very recurrently within my practice has been the rubber stamps, which I began using in 2003, which has its own sort of metaphors. The medium holds a metaphor of the bureaucratic apparatus meant to both sort of confirm and obscure identities, and one often thinks of the sort of inclusions and exclusions of the democratic process, which is how it began. But various bodies of work are, the source of reference often defines the bodies of work that are made using the rubber stamps, which means in the first case, or at least a large body of work was made where there were names of people who'd gone missing, called synonyms, and from there on there have been different bodies of work using the rubber stamp, whether it was symbols in some cases which were family symbols, or mason marks that were found in case of closet quarries, or a more recent body of work called Falling Fables, which have addresses of monuments that have gone missing nationally all over India.
Coming to Mansi briefly, before we open it out, when I first saw your work, this was at Kallat a few years ago, and obviously you've developed since then and you can speak about that, but it was in the form of porcelain figures which looked sort of like 16th century, if I remember, porcelain figures made in East Asia, but it wasn't actually porcelain figures, but you had made yourself up and then got yourself photographed to look like one of those, and it was really very remarkable. So, and you've had this tendency since then to make up and to perform and to be part of then artifacts that are created in these disguised ways. Can you elaborate on that, how that started, what are the materials you use?
I think I will go back to your first question, like today, artists in studio and outside. I feel that, artists over the years, I think artists have become more towards a common side, like more of a common person. And of course, going to the studio and have your own space, like not just a space as space, but a mind space or in isolation, it is important, and because you develop things there. One of my late performances is that it was suicide, and I just later when I see the images, I connect it to Arjun when he just when he wrapped his achieved weapons in a body-like shape on the tree, and I was also almost appearing like that, because I was tied in a white cloth horizontally on the tree branch for almost an hour with the weapon in my belly.
So to come back to you, Reena, I was looking through your schedule for 2011 and 2012, and I was amazed because it's all over the place, literally, it's all over the globe. Can you just briefly tell me two things? Firstly, an account of where your exhibitions are this year and the previous year, and secondly, when you show in so many places abroad and you're dealing with art which concerns the politics of the subcontinent, as you mentioned, how is it received? Do they understand the context sufficiently, or do you have problems?
As an artist, you certainly speak to your audience, and you really don't know who your audience is in this case when work is constantly traveling. But I think that's one of the abilities of art, is that it can be interpreted from people wherever they are, no matter who they are and what they bring to the work. And so, I mean, I'm not somebody who really thinks that the artist's intentions necessarily have to be read in the same manner that, you know, that one is invested into the work. Well, the last couple of years have been really exciting in terms of, you know, the sort of large-scale on-site pieces, which is what I am most excited about. Usually making work which is sort of responding to a site, and so one has been at the Kennedy Center, one which was at the Gothenburg Biennial. But other than that, the current exhibition that's now just opened in Copenhagen is work that I made in 2007 called Walls of the Womb, and some of them are from collections.
One of the reasons we set up the SKODA Prize was that while it's great that artists in India have now this international global outlook and are being shown in many parts of the world, we do feel that maybe Indian audiences bring a certain understanding to it which sometimes might be lacking in some other parts of the world. So it's important to have a sort of Indian benchmark for Indian art, for the quality of Indian art, and we hope to be able to, over time, build that into an institution that is recognized not just in India but across the world itself.